You live in a lovely place. This is a pretty town, isn't it? I've just flown in this morning from Minneapolis, where I was staying with my daughter. But tonight I'm going to talk about the most amazing piece of machinery on the planet, which is the human body. And it was designed to heal itself. And if it was designed to heal itself, the next question is, why are people sick? That's a reasonable question, isn't it? Newton's third law of motion states that to every action there is an equal and an opposite reaction. There's a reason. There is always a reason. Proverbs 26 verse 2 states that the curse causeless shall not come. And Galatians 6 verse 7 says, be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth, that he shall always reap. There is a reason. Now the human body will heal itself. I've got a lot of board here, haven't I? Little two-letter word here. If. It'll heal itself if you give it the right conditions. And we should always be private investigators investigating the why. So what we can deduct from this is that if people are not healing, there is a reason, and we have to investigate why. Now, there are two basic theories as to why people get sick in medicine today. I call them the two G's, the gene theory and the germ theory. Am I right? It's not me, it's in my genes. It's not me, it's the germ. Notice that both of those theories take away all responsibility on the person for what is happening in their body. And that's why it is not a popular message, what I give today. In some ways it is, in some ways it isn't. And the reason why it is because people are not getting better, are they? People are not healing. And what's the definition of insanity? To do what you've always done and expect different results. That's why it's a popular message, because people want to get better. People want to be healed. And drugs never cure disease. They just change the form and location of the disease. I always say to people who are on medication, go to the, do you call it a chemist, pharmacist? Go to the pharmacy and get a printout of the side effects of all the medication that you're on. You see, I believe that everyone should be their own doctor. Because only you know how you feel, only you know what you've been through, and only you know how your body reacts or responds. And the body will do this. It will not. Before I got on the plane at 5:30 this morning, I was very well dressed because I knew that in those planes and in their airport it's very cold. And I get cold very, very quickly. And when I got off the plane, I started to take some of those clothes off. Now, when I was getting cold, my body was doing this, put some more clothes on, you're getting cold. When I got off the plane, my body did this, I'm getting hot. So they're very simple. They're some of the very simple messages that your body gives you. And we all know that. And when I was picked up, I was very thirsty. In Australia, domestic flights, you can take water, but you can't take water here, can you? So I couldn't carry my trusty bottle of water. It's over there right now. And so I got off the plane and I was being picked up and I didn't want to go and get water because they might be looking for me, but my body was going like this. I need water. So I said, settle down, it's coming. But it's still not. And when I got in the plane, one of the first things that Peggy's daughter Patty gave me was, would you like some water? I gave water and my body stopped knocking. And when I got here, I changed and then my body did another knock. I was getting hungry. And I said, settle down in a minute. And then I was able to eat and the knocking stopped. They're very simple things, aren't they? The body knocks through an itch, it knocks through a pain, it knocks through discomfort, it knocks through hot, it knocks through cold. It's like when you're very, very hot, your body's knocking at you. What do you got to do now? You've got to cool off. And how nice on a hot day to dive in that cool water. Then the body stops knocking, doesn't it? You see, each one of us has our own doctor inside of us. And it will speak. It'll knock when there's a problem, and when you relieve it, it'll stop knocking, won't it? Sometimes there's a few knocks. Sometimes it might be cold, sometimes it might be thirst, sometimes it might be hunger, sometimes I need to go to the bathroom, and I usually assess the knocks. And when I got on the plane, because I drink a lot of water early, there was a knock to find a bathroom. I said, settle down, we've got to take off first. And we're going to wait for that pilot to say that the seatbelt sign can stop, and then we go to the bathroom and the knocking stops, yeah? We've got to listen. It's very important to listen. That's why you're the only one that can dictate. But there are two sicknesses that are taking a lot of people today in Australia, and I think America is no different, and that is heart disease and cancer. Is it like that in America? In fact, I can't make it any louder. They're big knocks. And I would like to suggest that there were some little knocks, but they didn't get listened to. And often that happens. And one of the problems today with medication is there'll be a knock, and what the medication will do, so the knock, you can't knock. Can you see that? It's like a mother taking a little boy, her little son, for a walk to grandma's house. It's 2 kilometres. And there's a stone gets in the little boy's shoe and it starts hurting, and he says, "Mommy, my foot hurts." He's only little, he doesn't know it just hurts. And she goes, "Shh, shh, quiet, we've got to get there on time." And it gets sorer and sorer. "Mummy, I can't walk." "Shh, shh, we'll be there in a minute." And then he really starts to cry, so she gives him you call it a candy, a lolly, something like that. And then and so she just happens to have a pain-killing medication in there that'll quieten him down. And finally they get to grandma's. He can't hardly walk by this time. They get to grandma's, they're on time. She takes the shoe and sock off, and the stone has worked its way inside to the flesh. So now she has to take him to the doctor. Now he's put on pain-killing medication, his foot's deadened. In some cases they may even have to do an operation to dig out this stone. He's put on antibiotics, he's put on anti-tetanus medication, etc., 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 etc. And all the mother had to do in the first 5 minutes was stop, investigate, find out why the foot was sore. Take the stone out, then there is no need for all the medication to quieten him down, etc., etc., etc. Yep. It's an old saying, it's called nip it in the bud. Nip it in the bud. But today, often medicine gives a drug that just stifles that knock. The knock can't be heard anymore. And when the knock isn't heard, we automatically think everything's all right now. Yeah? Everything's all right now. It's like driving along in a car. My first car was a Fiat, and it had a little blue light that flashed if the oil was low. And this time I'm driving along and the blue light's flashing, and I get a hammer and smash the light. Oh, that's better. That was so annoying, that light. I don't know much about what happens under the bonnet of a car, but I think when the oil's lacking, the engine will seize. Yeah, you got to listen to those little signs. I'd like to do an assessment tonight of the two theories, the germ theory and the gene theory. You see, to understand how the body heals, we need to have a look at how it runs. And to have a look at how the body runs, we have to go to the CBD, Central Business District of the human body. Do you know where that is? You've got 100 trillion of them. It's the cell. And when you understand how the cell works, then you begin to understand what makes it sick, and you start to understand what you can do to heal it. And inside the nucleus of that cell, in the very centre, is the DNA. The DNA is the genetic code that makes you what you are and me what I am. And there are 23 chromosomes in our DNA from our mother. My mother's chromosomes determined that I have light hair and blue eyes. My father's chromosomes determined that I have olive skin and I am short. We do it with our children, our nieces, our nephews, our grandmothers, don't we? We are a combination of all this information. A lot of information in the DNA. If you were to put all the information into alphabetical language, it would fill 1,000 books with 1,000 pages and 3,000 letters on each page. That's phenomenal, isn't it? In Psalm 139, it talks about the DNA. Did you know that? In 14, it says, verse 14, it says, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvellous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. My substance was not hid from thee when I was made in secret, curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being imperfect. In thy book were all my members written, when in continuance they were fashioned, when as yet there were none of them. Incredible, isn't it? Incredible. You look at that again in the light of the DNA. My substance was not hid from thee when I was made in secret, curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being imperfect. You know what being imperfect indicates? We've all got a little bit of damage in our DNAs. The saying that is a true saying is genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. You see, my mother died when she was 51, a cripple, in a wheelchair with rheumatoid arthritis. I have strong inherited genes in my DNA to arthritis. But I'm not going to pull the trigger, yeah? I'm not going to pull the trigger. Every now and then there's a little bit of a knock, especially considering I did a fall and I was climbing some mountains and I was running fast because it was getting dark and I tripped and it bruised and it hurt, and then after a few days, of course, it's all better because the body can heal itself. But about a year later, it was a very cold winter and it started to ache. What's my body doing? So one thread, genetic weakness. Second thread, an injury. That's why we can thread it ourselves. So I grated up some ginger. Only use ginger poultices for joint inflammation. My skin got very hot. It was pulling all the inflammation out of the joint to the skin. And it felt like it was burning, but I could handle it, and then it settled down. And then I find the pain's gone out of my joint. I have no pain in that joint now. It might speak to me at another time, and if it does, I know what to do. I know what to do. In my book, there is a chapter on acid alkaline. And arthritis loves a very acid environment. So I endeavoured to have a highly alkalizing diet. Just an illustration of some of the weaknesses that we each have. So isn't that interesting? It's 16 when it says, thine eyes did see my substance, yet being imperfect. What's my substance? My substance is made up of this DNA. But look at the next bit. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being imperfect. In thy book were all my members written, which in continuance were fashioned, when as yet there were none of them, according to the DNA. You may be aware that the Bible talks about books, that our names are written in it. It doesn't have to be a very big book, because all it has to have in it is our DNA. Isn't that fascinating? What is the DNA made up of? The outside strands are made up of polysaccharides. Poly means many. Saccharides means sugars. And everything we eat is made up of many sugars. The inside strands is made up of amino acids. And amino acids is the breakdown from the protein that we eat. So protein, as a vegetarian, I get my protein from legumes, chickpeas, lima beans, black-eyed beans, nuts and seeds. Now the glue that glues these two together is minerals. And the food that is the highest in minerals is the vegetable, And the vegetables that are the highest in minerals are the greens. There's your green barley, your kale. We didn't know what kale was 10 years ago, did we? It's a popular vegetable today. All those greens, very high in minerals. And you do not lose your minerals when you cook them. That's the good news. But just don't throw the water away, because that's where they go. So we are made up from what we eat. And when I look in some supermarket trolleys, and I look at their trolley and I think, how will their DNA ever be made? A lot of people that are living on fast food are almost deficient in all of these. I was talking to my daughter, who I've been staying with, and she knows one family, and the children eat no fruit and vegetables at all. They have cereal for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, pasta for tea. No fruit and vegetables at all. How will their DNA ever be made? Well, the spark of youth carries many. But the day comes when it starts to break down. The miracle of the human body is what it endures. Incredible. We are constantly being remade according to the pattern, according to the formula, according to the recipe, according to the plan. Nothing will change the colour of my eyes. Nothing I do will change that. Nothing I do will change my height. But our lifestyle practices, our dietary practices does influence the DNA. And it's not rocket science to know. If you're not eating nourishing food, the DNA can't even be structured right. It's an interesting field of study today called epigenetics. Epigenetics is the effect of what we eat and how we live on our genes. Constantly being remade according to the pattern. Eye cells are remade every 1 to 2 days. That's why if you have eye surgery, it's usually day surgery. And that's why if you get something in your eye, you've got to get it out within a few hours, or the eye's going to grow tissue over it. It might be locked in there. The next quickest are the cells that line our gastrointestinal tract. Our gastrointestinal tract is a very interesting part of the body. It's lined with villi that look like that. It's an empty tube. It's about 8 meters long. It has 2 holes. Here's one hole, and we know where the other hole is. And anything that goes into that tube is not part of you or me until it gets broken down to tiny substances, then absorbed through to the blood. So the blood basically is like little capillaries inside that villi. And God knew that it was very important because those cells are remade every 3 to 5 days. So they start here, this is the nursery, they travel up, and then off they go, taken away through that tube. We've got a new skin every month. Where does the old skin go? That's why we vacuum our floors, dust our furniture, change our clothes, wash the body every single day. Do you have a washer? Do you call it a washer? Flannel? Little square toweling thing where you... Face cloth? Yeah, get those dead cells off. The top layer of skin is actually dead. You don't feel it till you get down to the second layer, and then there are the little nerve endings in there. That's why we change our clothes. That's why we change our sheets every week. One doctor, Dr. Peter Dingle, who's got a set of DVDs out called Is Your House Killing You? He says you should vacuum your mattress regularly. That's why we should have pillow protectors on, mattress protectors. It's easier to wash them than the whole pillow because we're constantly shedding dead skin. Every month, a new skin. That's why if someone has psoriasis, arthritis, they should be healed in a month. Did you hear that? In a month. Why aren't they healed? We'll look at that in a minute. I've had 2 young men come to our retreat in the last year with cortisone-induced eczema. They initially had cortisone, and it's usually an allergy to wheat, dairy, refined sugar, so they were put on cortisone. Meanwhile, they're still eating the dairy, the wheat, and the sugar because they don't know. And eventually, they've been on cortisone for so long that it's causing the psoriasis. So they both told me they went to a website, and the website acknowledged this and said the only way is to stop the cortisone. They go through living hell for 2, 3, sometimes even 6 months, till eventually the body gets the message, no more drugs. And it starts to adjust and adapt. You know, one of the unique things about the human being is its ability to adapt, adjust, adapt, adjust. Now that can be good and that can be bad. The bad thing was their body had adjusted and adapted to the cortisone to the point that it was causing it. These people have to bite the bullet. We say that in Australia, you've got to bite the bullet, you just got to nut it through, and then eventually body adapts and adjusts. And both of them came to our health retreat in the final stages. And I was able to take them that much further and look at the whys. Why are these things so? When I was a little girl, there was an ad on the television, Julius Subner Miller. Have you heard of Julius Subner Miller? He used to do little experiments, and he was bald on top with his crazy curls, mad professor, and his catchline was, why are these things so? Rudyard Kipling, he wrote a whole poem on it. I'll just give you the first stanza. I have 6 trusty serving men. They taught me all I know. Their names are what, why, when, where, how, and who. Do you take them everywhere you go? You should, and you must. We all should be private investigators, investigating why these things are so. You've got a new liver about every 6 weeks. You've got new bones about every 3 months. In fact, I think it takes about 2 years and we've got a new body. So how is the new body made? Let's have a look at the gastrointestinal tract. How are those cells made? In this illustration, it'll give you an idea of how all the cells are made. DNA has all the information and it makes a photocopy. The photocopy is called RNA. And this photocopy is taken down to the little section in the cell called the workshop where the new cell is made. It's called ribosome. Inside every single cell of the body, by the way, we have 100 trillion, is all the information on how to make a whole new body. But we don't want the information on how to make a new eye, muscle, pancreatic cell, so it's all turned off. And in the gastrointestinal tract, the information we want is all turned on. Photocopies made, RNA comes down to ribosome, and the new cell is being made. Brick, what are the bricks? The bricks are amino acids. You've probably heard that protein builds us up. My boys, they all work out, the muscles like this. How did they do it? Yes, they did a lot of weight building exercise, but they also increased their protein. Another amino acid goes in, and these amino acids lock into each other like pieces in a jigsaw, brick upon brick. What glues them together? Minerals. Next amino acid goes there. Next amino acid goes there. It's just a beautiful design the way it all fits together. And every 3 to 5 days, out pops a new gastrointestinal tract cell. Well, how's an irritable bowel syndrome cell made? Because if the cells lining the gastrointestinal tract are remade every 3 to 5 days, how come someone with irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, colitis, how come they're not healed in, let's be generous, 2 weeks? Is that a reasonable question? I'd like to suggest it's a very reasonable question because the cells are constantly being remade. Well, let me show you how the new irritable bowel syndrome cell is made. First brick goes down. Maybe the first brick's pretty good. Next brick goes to lay down and oh dear, there's a piece of information missing in the DNA. So we've got a little bit of a gap there. It actually doesn't even fit well. And then, oh dear, they're short in an essential amino acid, so that's not actually going to work very well. Another brick gets put down, maybe this one's okay, but there's nothing to fit in there because we're missing other amino acids. And because of the types of shapes that chemicals produce, heavy metals produce, genetically modified foods produce, electromagnetic field excess it produces molecules that are not known in the body. And when the body is missing the essential amino acid, these strange molecules come along and they just shove their way in. Oh dear, there's another piece of information missing, so there's a gap there. Oh dear, it looks very sad, doesn't it? Now in that simple illustration, I've touched the iceberg, haven't I? So what have we got there? We've got a deficiency in amino acids because of a protein deficiency, or it might also be a deficiency in hydrochloric acid, which is part of breaking the protein down. And when people are stressed all the time, eating all day long, drink big amounts with their meals to water down their hydrochloric acid, so that's another reason. They might be short on minerals purely because they're not eating enough, but also because the food that they're eating is in impoverished soils. Impoverished soils, impoverished plants. And who eats the plant? Humans, impoverished human being. Organic gardeners work with the microbes in the soil. You see, the microbes in the soil are responsible for breaking down the heavy metals and the minerals in the soil and making it available for the plants. Healthy soil, and healthy soil is dependent on healthy microbes. Is a healthy plant, and when the human being eats that plant, they're getting all their minerals. You see, 92% of DNA damage, we're going to make a list now of what causes this damage in the DNA. 92% of DNA damage is caused by a mineral deficiency. Number one, because there are a lot of Americans who are just not eating the vegetables to get the minerals. Vegetables are high in fibre, high in minerals, low in sugars. Fruit is high in fibre, high in sugars, low in minerals. So if you're looking at bringing about a healing condition, you'll veer more to the vegetables and a little less to the fruit. You see that? Because we want those high minerals. But we've even seen a mineral deficiency in people who are eating their vegetables. And it's because the vegetables are deficient, because the soil's deficient. In Australia today, a lot of food is grown in superphosphate. Yeah, superphosphate's put in the soil. Superphosphate kills the microbes. Now there's nothing in the soil to pull the minerals out of the soil and put it into the plant. You see that? What also causes the damage is chemicals. We're going to get the chemicals out of our shampoo, out of our toothpaste. We're going to get it out of their clothes, out of our food, out of our houses. If you go into my laundry cupboard, you'll find a big bottle of white vinegar. You'll find a packet of sodium bicarbonate. You'll find a biodegradable laundry detergent. You'll find a little bottle of maybe eucalyptus oil. That's it. That's it. The chemicals are killing us. We had a guy do our program who, in our health retreat, you call it a wellness centre, yeah? People come for week or 2 week stays. And he was a pesticide man. You know, he goes and sprays houses for cockroaches, white ants. Do you have those things here? I said to him, is it true that women can buy in the supermarket chemical cleaners that you are not allowed to use? He said yes. So you see, many housewives are using poisonous, toxic things that not even the pest control guys are allowed to use. Nip it in the bud. Keep the house clean. Then you don't have to go to the heavy chemicals. And organically grown fruits and vegetables. One organically grown tomato will deliver 9 times the iron that a conventionally grown tomato will deliver. Whoa. So yes, the organic looks more, it costs more, but you're sometimes getting 9 times the nutrients in your organics. One area not often viewed as chemical but is in every sense of the word is drugs, and I'm referring to the legal and the illegal drugs. Every drug has a side effect. Electromagnetic field excess. We are electrical people. There's a spark of electricity in every cell in our body. Our nervous system, our brain, are predominantly electrical systems. I'm referring to the excess. Now, the electromagnetic field in our body is 10 hertz, written like that. When you're getting close to mobile phones, you know, the hands-free phones, microwaves, they really can get up to 30 hertz. And then those huge, big electrical towers, some of them are up to 80 hertz. Be very mindful of the room you're sleeping in. We had a lady do our program not long ago and she said, I haven't been sleeping for 2 years. So my detective hat went on. Did anything happen 2 years ago? She said, not really, although that's when they installed Wi-Fi into my bedroom. So every night she's sleeping with about 30 hertz floating around her. You see, it's an area that many people don't realise the danger because you can't see it. I say be mindful of your bedroom because we spend a third of our life in that room, don't we? So never charge your technology in your bedroom overnight. If you have a computer there, it's got to be all off. How many teenagers go to bed doing this? And how many parents think their children are so smart because at 1 year of age they can go like that? Okay? It's not smart. Anyone can do that. And how many parents, grandparents, let the children have it because it keeps them quiet? I was talking to an eye doctor recently and she said, we're getting really concerned about children's eyesight because she said up till the age of 11, the muscles, the short and the long range muscles in the eye are being established. And she said today children are having an overload of short range vision in the screens. So the short range vision muscles are getting overworked and the long range vision muscles aren't getting a workout. So you're getting this imbalance in the muscles in the eyes. She said, we believe that in another 10 years, no one will have 20/20 vision. And she said, this will have big ramifications for the pilots, the truck drivers, the people who are quite dependent on the long-range vision. Wow. Now, that's just the eyes. We're not even going into what's happening in the brain with this technology flying in there. My brother-in-law, he gathers all the teenagers' technology of an evening and takes it into his office and charges it there overnight. It's a great idea. You've got to have rules in the home. There must be rules around this technology. I don't know if it's like this in America. In the newspaper, you will never read about teenage or adolescent suicide. You will never read about it because they don't want to put any thoughts in young people's minds. But one night on the news, you know, I heard it and I grabbed it. 42 a week. That's 6 a day. This is adolescent and teenage suicide rates. I don't think the technology is the only contributing factor, but it's a huge one. Brains are not getting their proper rest. At the moment, you've got daylight saving. So the hours that our brain recharges is between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. And you'll find a lot of people, that's when the screens, they're busy all day, so that's when they get their screens. And the exposure of the eye and the brain to the screen is more damaging in those hours than any other time of a 24-hour period. Be cautious of your electromagnetic field excess. The danger from this is seen when people have overexposure, But I have met people, I've read books on it from people that have, got terrible reactions. One lady, wherever she went, if she came into this room right now, she'd be dry reaching because of those fluorescent lights. Even that did it. Why is it doing it to her and not to me? Her body's like this. It's actually brimming with chemicals, with moles, with electromagnetic field excess exposure. So only one more drop has to come in and she gets overflow. Can you see that? I may be here. So if I get one more drop, you see I'm not going to have overflow. We've had people come to our health centre and they said, I'm sorry, but I cannot come into your lecture room until the Wi-Fi's off. They're brimming because of overexposure. So be careful of your exposure to electromagnetic fields. Now the good news is the lady that wrote the book has conquered it. It took her a long time. She used essential oil. She did regular detoxes. She has these little things that she wears on her wrists that protect her. So there is a way around it. The body is amazing in its ability to heal. But what we want to do is nip it in the bud, okay? Prevent ever getting to there. Genetically modified foods. Genetically modified foods are the result of the DNA of two species being sliced together. Now, when you tamper with the DNA of two species and bring them together, there's this huge grey area that they don't really know what they're going to get. And they don't usually get what they want to get. And when a human being eats genetically modified food, the DNA of that food has the ability to tamper with your DNA, and you're starting to get problems like the simple illustration that I gave you there. They create molecules that are not known by the body. And our body's like a jigsaw, and the amino acids all fit into different places. It's like you've done a jigsaw and there's one piece missing, so you'll just borrow a piece from another jigsaw. Does that work? Of course, we know it does not work. And they're the molecules that are made from these things here. Stimulants. These stimulants have the ability to damage the DNA. One is sugar. And I'm not referring to the sugar cane, I'm referring to the pure crystallized acid that's been extracted from the sugar cane plant. One of the most lethal substances ever to be introduced to mankind. It's as closely related to the sugar cane as heroin is to the poppy plant. I'm not referring to honey, maple syrup, stevia. I'm referring to that acid that's extracted out. Now, on a chemist's shelf, you'll have the cocaine from the poppy, and you'll have the sugar from the sugar cane, and they both look the same. They're both white crystals. You put your finger into the heroin and taste it, you'd spit it out. You put your finger into the sugar, how could something so sweet be so toxic? Well, what does it do? It causes blood sugar levels to rise dramatically. The body says, whoa, we've got a problem. Quick, release a corresponding amount of insulin to get it down, and it does, but then it goes too low. And down there, what does the person do? They need a pickup. Another bit of sugar. Up, oh no, we're too, oh no, we're too low, oh no, we're too high. Crisis, 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 crisis. And eventually, pancreases just wear out. We're getting children today who are getting diabetes at 16 months of age. 4 years of age, 6 years of age. These are some of the calls that I've had in this last year. They haven't been on the planet long enough to beat up the pancreas. No, they've been born with a weakened DNA to the pancreas because of the parents' sugar habits. Ooh. Crisis to the pancreas, crisis to the brain. So this is another contributing factor to the mental illness that we're seeing. Because have you noticed when a person puts on, let's say a person puts on 40 pounds, their head doesn't get bigger, does it? Other parts of the body get bigger. You see, there's no store of fuel in the brain. And it consumes 15 times the glucose to any other cell. So this is Disastrous once it gets that drop. In 2 minutes, the brain's not working. Caffeine, its mate. Caffeine is so bitter that most things with caffeine come along with what? High amounts of sugar. If you were to make a cup of cocoa with no sweetening, you couldn't drink it. It is so bitter, so bitter. And this is Australia's darling. What's a darling? Something they love. One lady said, oh, I love my coffee. Just gets me up and moving in the morning. You know what my question is? Why do you need something to get you up and moving? Is it because you're going to bed too late? Is it because you're on your technology too late? Is it because you ate an evening meal too late? Is it because your pillow's mouldy? Is it because you've got no fresh air? Can you see why you've got to put the detective hat on? Why do you need something to get you up and moving? Another lady said, just makes me feel good. I said, yeah, it's stimulating you. If someone burnt you with a fire, you'd move. If someone put a cattle prod on you, you'd move. Do you know that's what caffeine's doing? And little by little, it begins to exhaust your adrenal glands. Recently, a lady said, I've got adrenal exhaustion. What's the question? Why? Do you drink coffee? Oh, I love my coffee. That's the thing that gets me moving. Do you see what it's doing? It's giving her adrenal exhaustion. Oh dear. Caffeine disrupts the neurotransmitters in the brain. So you can have a couple, say the man is having a Coke, you have a Dr. Pepper. We don't have that in Australia, but it's caffeine, yeah? A couple a day, maybe a Mars bar. The lady has a cup of coffee in the morning and at lunch and a little bit of chocolate. That is enough for that couple to give birth to a baby that has a DNA that is compromised and they can get mental illness at a young age. Wow. It is true that parents are the genetic engineers of their children. Now, if you're feeling very sad and very guilty right now, you're not allowed to. There's a verse in the Bible, it's Acts 17 verse 30, that states, God winks at our ignorance. Got that? So should we. If you didn't know, you cannot be held accountable. And especially when you walk past a coffee shop and there's a sign out the front that says, 2 cups of coffee a day will prevent Alzheimer's. Wrong. 2 cups of coffee a day will contribute to Alzheimer's. They lie. Did you know that? Because I'm afraid this, and we're not going to spend any time of this, because we've got too many more important things to talk about. I'm afraid the dollar drives a lot. Another stimulant is alcohol. Children can be born with fetal alcohol syndrome to parents that are having 2 drinks a week. And how many Aussies, Americans think that there's nothing wrong with 2 drinks a week? They'll say, well, I'm better than the other bloke that's having a bottle a night. Tobacco. Children can be born with holes in their honeycomb structure around their lungs. They can be born with less alveoli when their parents are smokers. Now, this is the DNA that's given to this child before they're born. And some people say, well, what about the 90-year-old man who's still smoking his pipe? I said, well, he must have been born with a strong DNA and his mother did everything right. He had some nourishing food. But his son, if he smokes, he won't even reach 50. And if his son smokes, that's the young man that's dying in hospital at 26 years of age from lung cancer. Can you see that? There's a whole lot of little threads that come together to make us who we are. A lot of little threads come together to make a rope. And you can try and pull that rope, a strong man, but he can't break it. But a little tiny mouse can come along and start nibbling at that rope. A little mouse that the strong man could just stomp on and squash in a moment, that little mouse can start nibbling at those threads. And he can break the rope that the strong man cannot break. We've got a saying in Australia, the straw that broke the camel's back. Yeah? A piece of straw can't break a camel's back, but on top of a whole lot of other things, it can tip the scales. And I find with most people that I meet, it's not one thing. And it's often not two things. It's actually a whole lot of little things. Like the dripping tap on a stone eating away at the function of the body. Something else that can damage the DNA is mold. Mold, fungus, it can splice into the DNA. This is genetic modification in the plant kingdom. So what fungus can do, it can splice into the DNA, say, of a plant. That's your algae growing on the bark of trees. It's reproducing itself through the DNA of the tree. David Attenborough has a show on ants. And these ants, under the ground, they grow a fungus or a mold, and the waste coming off it, they roll into little tiny balls and store it. It's their food. But David Attenborough noticed, as he was studying these ants, that they only tend the fungus for half an hour. Then they'll leave and another ant will come on. You see, if the ant tends the fungus for more than half an hour, the fungus can start to overtake the DNA of the ant. Can that happen in human beings? It can. It can. And that brings us over to the germ theory of disease, microorganisms. You see, fungus is a microorganism. And microorganisms are everywhere. They're on this table, though I cannot see them. They're in this air, though I cannot see them. They're on my skin, though I cannot see them. There are 10 times more microorganisms in this body than cells. And there are 10 times more microorganisms in the gastrointestinal tract than anywhere else in the body. They're everywhere. And these microorganisms are an integral part of the living, running of any living thing in the human body. But whenever cell damage happens, these microorganisms have the ability to change roles. They now become the cleanup team or the garbage collectors. This is what one microbiologist said to me. He said, "Oh, we call them the garbage collectors as microbiologists." Garbage collectors. What's their name? Their name is bacteria. That's what they do. So the more damage, the more waste, what are you going to find? The more bacteria. As the environment changes, they change. Now they become the exterminators. What's the exterminators? The exterminators are the yeast and fungus. As the environment changes, they change. They now become the undertakers. They change roles. The environment dictates the change. What's the name of the undertakers? That's the mold. And eventually, not long after the mold stage, the matter is brought back to dust. What I have just drawn for you there is the cycle of life, or the carbon cycle. A basic law of science states nothing's created and nothing's destroyed. It just changes form. Carbon cycle. And when you think about it, in Australia, we call our wooded areas bush. I think you call them the woods, is that right? Right. Right. So let's say, I usually say kookaburra. Have you heard of the kookaburra? We have a kookaburra in Australia. And it has a laugh. It's got, you may have heard of it, kookaburra. Let's say a kookaburra dies. Maybe it hits a tree or something and dies. What happens to it in the bush? Now, in the bush, there are a few things that come along and help. The dingo might come along and have a little bite. A crow might come and have a nibble. Wallabies eat grass. Wallabies wouldn't do that. But your meat-eating things will come and have a nibble. Then the blowfly will land its maggots, and the dung beetles, do you have dung beetles that eat dung? They come up, and then the worms come up, and eventually the kookaburra is now dust, yeah? You see, these are the players in the cycle of life. These are the performers in the cycle of life. Their role is to bring matter back to dust. Florence Nightingale knew this. Florence Nightingale, very famous nurse, 1855. She was asked to go to Scutari. Now, this is the port where the wounded from the Crimean War were being taken. There's the Black Sea. This is Scutari here. And this is Crimea. And in the Crimean War, the British and the French soldiers were fighting the Russians. The wounded were put in boats and they were taken down to the port. On a rough sea with bad weather, that trip may take several days. Once they got to the hospital, the conditions were appalling. In fact, a journalist went and had a look, went back to England, and headlines in the newspaper, "Did we raise our young men to rot in this filthy hospital?" As soon as the English people found out that, the pressure was put on, and of course the government arranged for Florence with 35 nurses to go to Scutari and see what they could do. When she arrived, the conditions were appalling. Death rate in that hospital was 50%. So the men, the soldiers, had a better survival rate on the battlefront than they had in that hospital. She found raw sewage in the corridors. She found a man who was still in his battle clothes 2 weeks after being admitted to the hospital. But when she arrived, the doctor said, "This is men's business. You're not coming in here." So she couldn't go in. They sent her to the kitchen. It was filthy. The men's food was big pots of water with little bits of rotten meat in it. You cannot heal without nourishment. So the first thing Florence did was she got her nurses to start cleaning the kitchen. At least they could start there. Meanwhile, she telegrammed her father, who was a wealthy Englishman. She said, "Father, I'd like a shipload of clean linen, clean bandages, clean bedclothes, mattresses, scrubbing brushes, and a cook." 2.5 weeks later, another shipload of wounded came to Scutari. The hospital was already overflowing. So the doctor said to Florence and her nurses, "All right, you can come in." And the first thing she did was she started scrubbing. She scrubbed and she cleaned. She got her nurses to clean. She'd already got some men to see if they could fix the plumbing. That was in November 1855 that she arrived. Within 6 months, the death rate was 2%. 2%. Now, this is about 80 years before antibiotics were discovered. That's why we need to remember Florence Nightingale and her experience. When she finally got back to London, she heard that they had a welcoming party for her. She changed her name to Mary Smith, went down the back gangplank and slipped home. And later on she said, they said to her, "Why did you do that?" She said, "I am not a heroine." She said, "All I did was increase hygiene," got that? "Sanitation and nutrition." Hygiene, sanitation, nutrition. She turned the tap off. There was nothing for these guys to eat. Can you see that? They're just opportunist organisms. They're just going to hang around wherever they get well fed. And what's their feed? Waste. When Florence Nightingale read of Louis Pasteur's theory, she's in England, he's in France, about the same time. When she read of his theory that germs cause disease, she said, "This is the theory of a man of a very unstable mind." And anyone who believes it, she said, is equally unstable. She knew that germs don't cause disease. She knew that germs were the result of unhealthful conditions. At the time of Louis Pasteur, there was another scientist called Antoine Bouchon. 6 times professor, but most people have never heard of him because his theory was not popular. Pasteur's theory was very popular. Here's Pasteur's theory. You poor thing, a germ has come in and made you sick. Take this poison to kill the germ and you will be well. What was Beauchamp's theory? He says disease is born in us and of us. Can you see why no one liked his theory? He said germs don't cause disease. They're the result. One day he got a dead cat. He wrapped it in an airtight container, came back 4 months later, opened the container, dust. Airtight container. What brought cat back to dust? No dung beetles, no dingoes, no worms, no maggots, no blowflies to speed up the process. What brought cat back to dust? The microorganisms that were an integral part of living, running cat took their suit of clothes off, so to speak, put their rubber gloves and apron on and became the clean-up team. As the environment changed, they changed. Now the exterminators, then the undertakers, till eventually they had brought the matter, the dead cat, back to dust. With great excitement, Antoine Beauchamp put the dust under the microscope. It was alive with microorganisms. Now they're waiting for their next job. What's the basic law of science? Nothing's created, nothing's destroyed. It just changes form. And the environment dictates the change. An apple tree. The leaves come in the spring under the action of microorganisms. The flower comes under the action of microorganisms. The apple develops under the action of microorganisms, but the apple is not ready to eat. It must ripen. What ripens the apple? The same microorganisms. And then the apple falls off the tree and no one eats it. What does it do now? Rots under the action of the same microorganism. We've got a sealed skin there. Nothing's coming in to do it. It's the microbes. They just change according to the environment. That's why we have compost bins, isn't it? That's why we dig in our compost. I have 3 compost bins at home. One I'm adding to, one is sitting, and one I'm taking from. How do I know when it's ready to take from? Because now the pumpkins start growing in it. It's all back to dust. And when I put that compost into my garden, what am I putting into my garden? I'm putting microbes. Now they play another role. Those microbes in the soil are responsible for the breakdown of the heavy metals and the minerals in the soil. Those microbes are responsible for the absorption of the minerals into the plant. Those microbes are responsible for nourishing the plant. Those microbes are also responsible for protection. They protect the plant from harmful pathogens. And the plant knows that it needs those microbes, so 50% of the fuel that it makes, according to photosynthesis, it sends down to the roots to feed the plants. Feed the microbes. What an amazing plan. Beautiful illustration of taking only to give again. Do you know the law of service is written on every plant? And that's an illustration. That plant, it knows it needs those microbes. And that's why organically grown fruits and vegetables have a far higher nutrient content because of these microbes. Now I'm going to take it somewhere you may never have thought to take it. When we were in utero, in our mother's wombs, our guts were sterile. No microbes in our gut. And when we were born, we were literally showered with our mother's microorganisms. Last year in Australia, there was a documentary by Catalyst called The Gut Reaction, and the whole show was on microbes. And there was an obstetrician there, and he said, I always thought God made a mistake putting the birth canal and the anus so close, Because when that baby's born, we don't want it to go anywhere near what's coming out of the anus. But he said, I now know it's a perfect design. You see, when the baby comes through the birth canal and the birth canal stretches, the anus also stretches. And when the baby's born, when the cool air touches the baby's skin for the first time, the baby goes, and what's that air laden with? What's coming out of that passage next door? Notice what the obstetrician said, perfect design. And now those microbes come into the gut and they build up a thick turf wall lining. The two most famous and the two permanent are Lactobacillus acidophilus, bifidus bacterium. What does that turf do in the human body? You remember I said that anything that goes in our gastrointestinal tract is not part of us until it gets broken down and into the blood. That thick turf wall made up of microbes does exactly the same role as in the soil. That thick turf wall is responsible for the final breakdown of our food. That thick turf wall is responsible for the absorption of those nutrients. That thick turf wall nourishes those little cells that line the gut, and that thick turf wall is responsible for protection. It guards us against anything that might be in that gut and should not be in our blood. How important is that? But if a mother has had antibiotics through pregnancy, the antibiotics compromise part of the wall. If a mother has had cortisone, maybe for eczema or something, the cortisone kills off the microbes. Contraceptive pill kills off the microbes. A lot of pain-killing medication kills off microbes. Statin drugs, your cholesterol-lowering drugs, kills off the microbes. Oh dear. And if a mother's flora is compromised, when her baby's born, what will the baby's flora be like? Compromised. Now, in the first 3 days of a baby's life, there is a thick, creamy, rich substance called colostrum. And that colostrum is rich in microbes. But if the mother's gut flora is compromised, even that flora balance in her colostrum will be compromised. You see that? So many babies are born today with compromised gut floras. And then the baby's given altered cow's milk, heated up in a microwave in a plastic bottle. Further blow. And then the baby has a little cry because it can't handle the gut, can't handle the cow's milk. Cow's milk is excellent milk for cows. Cows, that's it. And so the mother gives it a little painkiller, baby Panadol or something. Well, the ad says it's safe. Don't believe it. Further blow. And then at 2 months of age, another terrible blow comes in. It's called vaccination. Well, unfortunately, they're vaccinating babies for hepatitis B at birth. Did you know that? One doctor said, no one's vaccinating my baby. My baby is not a drug addict, and my baby is not a prostitute. Did you get that? That's who gets Hep B, prostitutes and drug addicts. So why are they vaccinating newborn babies? As soon as that baby's born, don't let that baby out of your sight. 2 months, the vaccine comes in, another further blow. Further blow. Can you see what's happening? And then at 4 months, the baby started to be starts to get shoveled into the baby's mouth. Baby has no teeth. How much sense does that make? You see, if baby's got no teeth, it's got no enzymes in the mouth to help break the food down. Another blow. Then the 4-month vaccine comes in. Oh dear, the baby's fitting. Oh dear, the baby's dead. That's devastating. Can you see it's a final on a whole lot of threads? You call it crib death? Cot death? SIDS. In Japan, they were so concerned about the side effects from the whooping cough vaccine that they stopped the whooping cough vaccine under 2 years of age. Two things happened. Whooping cough stopped and the SIDS stopped. Scary stuff. Can you see where we're coming from? The gut. Hippocrates said all disease begins in the gut, and he didn't know what I'm telling you now. Whoa, these microbes are important. Can you starting to see that these are not the enemy? They're an integral part of life on planet Earth. And if they're out of control, you've got to ask why. And you know they're out of control because they smell so bad, don't they? You see, smell, you've got to notice smell, part of being your own doctor. It's like the little boy, 4 years of age, he had a cast on. There was a bad smell coming out. And he was crying all the time. And the father said to the mother, take him back to the doctor. The doctor said, no, you cannot take the cast off until 6 weeks. It was 4 weeks. Father came home that night. Well, what happened? Well, she said, the doctor said it has to stay on. He said, make another appointment to come tomorrow and I'm coming. Went in. Father said, this child is crying all the time. There is something wrong. And we smell a bad smell. And doctor said, no, it's got to stay on for 6 weeks. So the father went to the car, got the tin snips, came in, cut it off in front of the doctor, cut the whole cast off. And the stench was terrible and gangrene was set in on his little... Yeah. Can you see you got to listen? Yes. The smell and the child's cries told that something was wrong. What's the use of giving painkillers for that? You've got, what is the old saying, a stitch in time saves 9. You've got to listen to those first few little knocks. And sometimes the knock may be a bad smell. You've got to do something about it. I used illustrations to show what happens when something dies. I used also illustrations in the garden to show you that these microbes, they have the ability to change roles according to the environment. So now let's take it one step further and have a look at their true role in disease in the human body. When I was a little girl, I used to get bronchitis a bit, and I would go to the doctor who would give me cherry-flavoured syrup, which I had to take 3 times a day. And we know now, and I do know, of course, it was antibiotics. So I was groomed, raised as a child to think that a germ made you sick, a germ got into my lungs, gave me an infection, and I had to take a drug to kill. It's Pasteur's theory. Then I trained as a psychiatric nurse. And as a psychiatric nurse, we also had we had an operating theatre in our hospital, so we had male and female surgical wings. So I was, of course, taught basic nursing training too. But we nurses led a very wild life. There are a lot of parties and not living very well. And I would get bronchitis. And I would start coughing up yellow lumps, and I would think, oh, I've got an infection. I better go and get an antibiotic. So I'd take the antibiotic and it would all settle down. Do you know they did research recently because there's been a big thrust to reduce the antibiotic use. You probably have heard of that, because when it comes time that people need them, they don't work because they're immune to them. And this study looked at 100 people, all had the flu. 50 took antibiotics, 50 didn't, all got better. Did everyone hear that? All got better. The body can heal itself. Amen. So I would go to the doctor, I would get the antibiotics, and then when my first daughter got sick, she was 16 months of age, she got an earache. And everyone said, don't play with the ears, she'll go deaf. Never should we make a decision on this, yeah? We need more of this. The human body can heal itself if you give it the right conditions. So I went straight to the doctor who put my daughter on antibiotics. Her earache eased within probably the first 6 hours. Finished the course, earache came back. I didn't know what to do. I was a little bit of a hippie alternate lifestyler. So I went back to the doctor. Over 6 weeks, 4 courses of antibiotics, the earache comes back. I knew the definition of insanity, to do what you've always done and expect different results. So as the doctor is writing the 5th script for antibiotics, I said to him, will my daughter be on antibiotics for the rest of her life? Am I coming to that conclusion? He was challenged by my question. He said, here's a referral to the ear, nose and throat specialist. So I took my daughter there. He looked in her mouth, he looked in her ear, he said, the child's teething, give her these drops to keep the eustachian tubes clear. That's it. So when my next child, 2 years later, got an earache, I went straight to the old lady next door. I said, I was 25, she's 85. I said, what did your mother do when you had an earache as a child? She said, Mum would steam up an onion on the stove. I went home, steamed up an onion, wrapped it on my son's ear. He slept 2 hours. What does that tell you? He's not in any more pain. He woke up happy. That was it. And it was that experience that got me on the path of natural healing. I was impressed. No other child of mine received any more antibiotics. I'd have them wrapped up with charcoal and all sorts of bits. And then my appetite was insatiable to find out natural methods of healing. And there are many books written on it. What are antibiotics? But let's look at the word first. Anti means against, biotic means life. If we're living organisms, we have to get away from this kill mentality, because anything that can kill a small organism can kill a big. And what are we? We're the big. 1% of doctors today are claiming that antibiotics are causing more problems than they ever cured. I'm not against antibiotics. They've saved millions of lives and they will continue to save lives. But the problem is today they're starting to cause more problems than they cure. I believe that the human body can cope with about 2 courses of antibiotics in a lifetime. Got that? What's happening today is many people are having 2 or 3 a year. They get a sinus, they get a sniffle, they get a cold. And then a serious thing happens and they get a major infection and the antibiotics aren't doing it. I believe most people should go through their whole life without ever having an antibiotic. It should be just kept for life-saving. And really, if everyone knew how to nip things in the bud, we wouldn't even get to that. Alexander Fleming, 1929, he's growing bacteria in his laboratory. One morning he came in and his bacteria was dead. So he began to investigate, as every true scientist does. There was nothing in the laboratory that could have caused it. So he looked outside, nothing outside. He looked up, and in the next story, there was a plate of fruit. And in the plate of fruit was a mouldy orange. And that mouldy orange gives off a dust. In that dust is its spore, and in that dust is a highly toxic gas designed to kill off anything that would compete with the mould's food source. It's almost as if the mould says, this is my orange, no one else is going to get it. What might try and get his orange are the yeasts and funguses. So the dust came down, settled on Alexander Fleming's bacteria and killed it. He called the mould penicillium. He called the mould waste penicillic acid, and that penicillic acid is the penicillin that we know today. So when a person takes an antibiotic, what are they putting into their body? A mould waste. Another mould is aspergillus, and it gives off aflatoxin. Aflatoxin is the most carcinogenic substance that has ever been tested. If you put into the web fungus, cancer, you'll be amazed at what will come up. The link between fungus and cancer is well acknowledged in many circles today. Difficult for medicine to acknowledge it, because if they acknowledge it, they also have to acknowledge it that one of their most popular drugs, the antibiotic, is contributing to the cancer that we are seeing. Now, as we've looked at, it's just an opportunist organism. It'll only hang around where it's going to get well fed. So what do we do to get rid of it? Number one, starve it. What's its favourite food? I have a sugar. I'll just get a book that I have written on the subject. It's called Self-Heal by Design. And my aim was to get this information into a book. That's a small book. No waffle in this book. I don't like books with waffle. It's just straight to the point. But there's a chapter in there. It's called Fungus's Favourite Foods, the Fungal Feast. It loves sugar. In fact, if someone comes to me wanting to conquer the cancer, I even stop all fruit just initially. And the programs are outlined in the book. So for 6 weeks, if someone wants to conquer cancer, no fruit. After 6 weeks, maybe Granny Smith apple or grapefruit, just low sugar fruits. So what do they eat? Lots of vegetables. Legumes, lentils, chickpeas, lima bean. Nuts, except for the peanut. You know, a peanut molds very, very easily, and often aflatoxin is found in that peanut. In Australia, peanuts are banned in schools. Children have had anaphylactic shocks. It's not the peanut, it's the mould in the peanut. If you can grow peanuts, harvest them and dry them straight away and keep them in a healthy environment, you know, it's safe. But I think America's not much different to Australia. 78% are living in the cities, so it's in the country that it's all grown, then it's harvested, put in big silos. You get a cold, frosty morning, a hot, sunny day. What's building up in the silo is moisture, and that's where the mould growth happens. In fact, the book that talks about this in detail is a China study. Dr. Colin Campbell, he goes into detail and shows that he was asked to go to the Philippines. Children were dying of liver cancer, 8 to 10 years of age, and he traced it to the peanut butter. Every jar of peanut butter he tested had aflatoxin in it. So if you're feeling very sad right now because you love peanut butter, try almond butter, try cashew butter. They're just as nice. They're nuts. They don't have the mould problem that the peanut has. To date, medicine has documented 1.5 million different moulds, yeasts and funguses, and 1,000 of those are known to cause disease in humans. And every mould has 1, 2 or 3 different mould wastes. And every mould waste affects a different body part. Aflatoxin directly affects the liver, so it causes liver cancer. But Dr. Colin Campbell, in his book, it's a fascinating book, he shows that the wealthy children in the Philippines, they were the ones dying of the liver cancer. And the country, or the rural Philippines, they weren't dying of the liver cancer. And this struggled. He really struggled with this because he thought that the city, wealthy children would be eating better. But when he had a look at their diet, it was high meat, high dairy, high sugar, high refined grains. Whereas the rural, they weren't having the sugar, they weren't having the meat, they couldn't afford it. Anyway, he traced it right down to the casein, or the protein that's in the dairy products. And he showed very clearly in his research it fed the cancer. Remember, it's an opportunist organism. So rural and city children alike were getting the peanut butter, but it was the wealthy children were dying because they were feeding it with the foods that they were eating. So number one, you've got to starve it. You've got to check your house. No mold, can't be any mold in the house. If there is, you've got to get a plumber or a builder in and find out why it's there. And if it's unfixable, sorry, you'll just have to probably sell the house. What's your health worth? If you, and I've quoted it in my book, in Leviticus, in the Bible, if there's mold in the house had to be destroyed. If it was in any clothes, they had to be burnt. You know, this is toxic stuff. Most people don't realise how toxic it is. Number two, kill. I do think we've got to get away from the kill mentality, but there are herbs that will kill fungus and won't kill you. Isn't that good news? Garlic, it's a potent one. olive leaf extract, that's another one, and grapefruit seed extract. And a South American herb called Pordiaco. What I advise is people alternate, you know, week on that, a week on that, a week on that, alternating it. But in my book, I also give some others as well. Balance. We've got to bring back the balance. You may have the question, as I'm sure you do, what if the gut's compromised? How can we heal that? Well, bringing back the balance is flooding the gastrointestinal tract with a probiotic. That's your Lactobacillus acidophilus supplements. Now healing the gut. Number one, probiotic. And that's 3/4 of an hour before breakfast, so it goes way down where you want it to go. And there are 2 herbs that are specifically designed to coat, soothe and heal the lining of the gut. That is aloe vera and slippery elm. Both are a little bit slimy, and that's exactly what you want because that's the lining of your gut. It just looks like the inside of your mouth. It's sort of got a mucousy lining. So when people have irritable bowel syndrome, this is how I see them heal. I see them healing in 3 days. I've had people who had irritable bowel syndrome for 30 years. And in 3 days, they've gone from 10 visits to the bathroom to 4 visits to the bathroom. Isn't that amazing? Number 4 is you've got to stop 3 foods that are like kerosene to the fire in an inflamed gut. One is wheat, the other is dairy, and the other is the refined sugar. In 3 days, I see healing. Number 4, alkalize. Now there are a couple of substances that specifically are very alkalizing to the body. One is the greens. So when we get someone come to our health retreat who wants to conquer their cancer, wants advice with it, I advise green drinks. Now what we do at our health retreat, we gather wild greens, all the edible greens, we blend it with water, strain it, and we put it into little bottles, and they drink about 1 litre of that in the day. That's alkalizing from the inside. And over a week, we'll do 5 sodium bicarbonate wraps. This is what our grandmothers killed mould in the bathroom with. This is what they used to kill mould in agriculture. This is what an Italian oncologist, Dr. Tullio Simoncini, he injects sodium bicarb straight into cancers and has an amazing result. You see, cancer, fungus, both love an acid environment. And what sodium bicarb does, it gives a wave of alkalinity. If you drink it, all it will do is neutralize your stomach acid, and you don't want to do that. You want a nice, strong stomach acid. But if someone has stomach cancer, they could maybe drink it just before bed, or maybe an hour before a meal when the stomach's empty. And if someone had colon cancer, they could do enemas with the sodium bicarb. But really anywhere else in the body, what we do is we wrap them up. 2 kilos, what's that, 4 pounds of sodium bicarbonate and about 5 litres of hot water. We put towels in, we wring them out, and we wrap the whole body and wrap it all up in blankets. We've seen some amazing turnarounds. Number 5, Ormus. Orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements. It's a mineral supplement. They're minerals in a monoatomic form. They've been dropped out of seawater, and in this monoatomic form, they're easily utilized by the body. And research now is showing that this Ormus can heal DNA damage. Makes sense, doesn't it? You've got to get the formula, the plans, the recipe right. It's not in this form, in the Ormies. You can put that into the web and get a spiel on it. And in my book, I've got a chapter on genetics, and the last 2 pages of the chapter on genetics, I go into more detail with the Ormies. Is that it? It is. That's giving the body the conditions for healing. Yes?
I didn't catch what the Ormies is.
It's orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements, and they're minerals in a monoatomic form. And as a monoatomic form, you're accessing minerals that aren't accessible just in the seawater. It's dropped out in a form that is easily utilised by the body. And these monoatomic minerals are able to heal DNA damage. But if you Google that, you'll get a whole spiel on it. A lot of organic gardeners are using it now. The plants can utilise it too. You get a boost in growth by using that. Now what?
Is it available most anywhere?
I don't know. In Australia, there are a few people that make it. So you'd have to, in fact, I think if you go onto the web and you collect seawater, it'll tell you how to make it. So I advise 5 drops every morning, and then you increase, you increase 1 drop a week until you're up to 16 drops, and 16 drops equals 1 teaspoon. And basically that's the maintenance dose until you're healed. What I have seen when people come to me wanting help with cancer, sometimes I have seen the cancer turn around. I've seen that happen a few times. I've seen tumours disappear. I've seen people regain their life again. So sometimes I've seen a turnaround. Sometimes I have seen 3 months extend into 6 years. And sometimes I have seen the last days made more comfortable. It's very difficult to predict because there are so many things that come together for this. There is not one thing that causes cancer. Yes, it is a fungus, but one then must look at the person. Why is it there? Remember, it's just an opportunist organism. Sometimes it's chemical damage. Sometimes it's heavy metal damage. Sometimes it's microbes in the body that have been allowed to populate because of a compromised gut flora and too much sugar and too much peanuts, too much yeast. So in every case, there can be different factors coming together, and that's why the detective has to be looked on to find out why. And there is one more aspect, and this is particularly with women and also with men, and that is a hormone aspect. When women have breast cancer, the hormones are obviously out of balance, and for a man to have prostate cancer, the hormones are out of balance. So that's another section that I have not listed here. And tomorrow night, I'm going to be speaking on hormone balancing. So I'll be addressing that in that lecture. We have time for some questions, if there are any questions. Yes?
You talk about fungus being the cause of cancer, but I also hear from a lot of naturalists that mushrooms can actually cure cancer, specifically turkey tail for breast cancer.
Yes. The question is that some are saying mushrooms can heal cancer. Myself, I prefer to keep away from them. And usually it's a mushroom that is fed in like a cultured product. And so what you're doing with that, you're taking a lot of Lactobacillus acidophilus bifidobacterium. So, in fact, there are many that are curing cancer. There are many who have little bits and pieces that they say are making a large effect. For instance, apricot kernels. Have you heard of apricot kernels? There's a whole book written on it. It's called World Without Cancer. Now, apricot kernels, when they are chewed up in the mouth, they release cyanide. Now, when the cyanide mostly is released when the pancreatic juices hit it, and the cyanide goes into a cancer cell and kills it. If it goes into a healthy cell, there is an enzyme called rhodonase that deactivates it. So that specific substance that's in the apricot kernels basically is killing fungus.
I just started those, so I'm glad
Yeah.
that you approved.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. And you've also probably heard of Royal Raymond Rife, who was killing cancer with frequencies. And he found that at a certain frequency he could kill cancer cells, and basically they are fungal cells. But unfortunately the AMA have very successfully, as you can see, because not many people have heard of that. This was in about, I think, the 30s or 40s. He had a microscope that could do it that he built. Well, they destroyed the microscope. There's a few doctors in Australia over in Perth that have been doing the treatment. It cost $10,000 for the treatment. And there is another treatment in Mexico where they'll take all your blood out and then put fresh, healthy blood back in. And I know some people are paying a fortune to have that done. One lady I know went all the way over to do it, and she said the food was appalling. So they're only looking at one aspect, whereas you have to look at the whole picture. Cancer cells cannot live in the presence of oxygen. And so ozone therapy, hyperbaric chambers, you've probably heard of hyperbaric chambers, oxygenating the blood. Fungus hates oxygen. So you see then again, that shows you basically, are we talking about fungus or cancer? A person can have fungus without cancer, but it certainly can develop into that. Yes. And prednisone, they're all the steroid drugs. All the steroid drugs are very dangerous to the body. Well, one would look at why the person's taking the cortisone. Usually the person takes cortisone because of psoriasis? Yeah, so psoriasis can be quite easily healed by healing the gut. And it's the hybridized wheat, it's the dairy, the refined sugar that are feeding the psoriasis and the eczema. No. No, the question, what is the organic wheat fine? No, it's not. In the 1950s, wheat went through intensive crossbreeding. They wanted to produce a plant that had a high yield of grain, and they did, but the stalk broke before they could harvest it because it was so heavy. So they went back and more intensive crossbreeding. See, in the 50s, the wheat grew this high, but now the wheat only grows that high. It's got a thicker stem and it can hold that heavy load of grain. One farmer said he can get 10 times high yield per acre with this new hybridized wheat. Dr. Norman Bulag got a Nobel Prize in the 1969 for this hybridized grain. And yes, it saved many thousands, even millions, it is claimed, from starvation. But what was never addressed was the effect of that hybridized wheat on the human body. For instance, it gets the blood sugar level up higher than sugar. Well, wheat, that explains the diabetic epidemic. And what are diabetics told to eat? Whole grain wheat, whole grain pasta. The whole grain gets it up higher than even the refined. And it's because of the type of starch that's in it. If you want to pursue that a little bit more, there's a book called Wheat Belly by Dr. William Davis. He does a very good job at explaining that in there. The other part of wheat that was never addressed is the gluten structure. Now, in the original wheat, the structure looked like that. That's the protein or the gluten structure. And then thousands of years ago, did a field hybrid with a wild grass and came up with a more complex structure. So this is called the Emma strain of wheat. This is called the Inkhorn strain. Now it's this one that had the intensive crossbreeding done on it. So the hybridized wheat, that produced an incredibly complex structure. And when you've got a when you've got a compromised gut, these cells here, they have no nourishment because there's no flora there, whereas these cells here, they have nourishment because of the flora. And when this hybridized wheat gets broken down in the gut, it breaks down to glutamorphine. Let me show you what happens here. There's the gluto, there's the morphine. So this glutamorphine comes through here, and that healthy cell can knock off the morphine. Glutamorphine comes through here. That unhealthy cell cannot knock off the morphine, so glutamorphine gets into the blood. That's taken to the brain, and the opiate receptor sites in the brain pick that up. That explains why one of the most common symptoms of an intolerance to this hybridized wheat is brain fog. How many people have brain fog? And in Australia, there are many who are eating it 3 times a day. Cereal and toast for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, maybe donut. We call it biscuit, you call it cookies, is that right? And then pasta for tea. That's absolute overload on this hybridized wheat. Even organic wheat is all from this hybridized wheat. The only grain that is a wild or field hybrid from this emmer wheat is spelt and kamut. They still retain that fragile structure. If someone is celiac, they can't even handle that. But usually gluten sensitivity and tolerance can handle that. And if you make that into a sourdough bread, the sourdough process breaks down the gluten or the protein in the grain and makes it less complex. And if you make the hybridized wheat into a sourdough bread, oh yes, it'll break it down a little bit, but it's still pretty complex. So can you see the problem we've got here? It's not only the hybridized wheat, it's the compromised gut. Now, there are 2 books that talk about this. One is Gut and Psychology by Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride, and the other book is Grain Brain by Dr. Pert Muller. Both these doctors have decades of clinical practice up their sleeve, showing how they're conquering mental illness by taking their patients off the wheat, off the dairy, off the refined sugar. I could almost have an answering service on my phone. Stop the wheat, stop the dairy, stop the refined sugar. Next, stop the wheat, stop the... And you stop an autistic child, the wheat, dairy and refined sugar, you get a 50% improvement. That's well acknowledged. Dr. Bruce Fife in his book, Stop Autism Now, Stop Alzheimer's Now, there's 2 books, he also talks about that. So you see, many authors are talking about it today. They're all doctors with decades of clinical practice up their sleeve. They're all blowing the whistle on it. And there are so many other grains. You've got millet and amaranth and quinoa and buckwheat, rice. There's lots of different grains. Some guts can handle raw milk and some cannot. It appears to have a lot to do with your genetics. But you see, we're the only creature that drinks milk past babyhood. There's no need for us to have milk. People say, what milk do you drink, Barbara? I say, I'm weaned. I've got teeth and I eat food. Strange things are happening today. They're feeding babies food and they've got no teeth, and adults are drinking milk. It's strange. And you know there's been a death and no one attended the funeral because no one knew he died. It was the death of common sense. Not very common now, is it? This lady's a nurse's aide and she sees old people not responding to the antibiotic. So at 10 more courses of the antibiotic. And that's why I say the definition of insanity. It's insane to do the same thing and expect different results. And some doctors are saying in a case like that, the gut never, ever is able to properly heal again. And can you see what that person has just lost? it seems an oxymoron, doesn't it? They're acknowledging what the antibiotics are causing, but what is difficult is they've got nothing else. They've got nothing else. But there's a big push in Australia today to get doctors to reduce the antibiotic use because they acknowledge it is, remember what I said, 1% of doctors today are claiming that the antibiotics are causing more problems than they ever cured. A raw diet curing cancer and juices. When a person has cancer, I find they have a compromised gut, and raw food is not able to be utilised by them. When you cook food, you actually break the fibre down a little bit so it's easier to absorb. Raw food will deliver what cooked won't, and cooked will deliver what raw won't. So depending on the gut, depending on observing how the person can handle it, we make adjustments there. I myself aim for a 50 raw, 50 cooked. And sometimes we've had some very, very large people. So I think 10 kilos is about 20 pounds. So we have sometimes people who would be 200 kilo. What's that, 400 pound? That's a very big person. That person can usually handle a raw diet for a while. But someone who's very, very slight, a raw diet, they can lose too much weight. So again, with every person, you make some adjustments. We do juices at Misty, but we don't do too many juices with the cancer patient because cancer cells consume 15 times the glucose. So you put a high fruit, high juice diet, that can be counterproductive. So what we do is we only give them 3 juices in a day and we alternate it with the green drinks. Whereas most of our guests on the 2 days of juicing, they have 5 juices in the day. So every 2 hours they have a mostly vegetable juice. Yeah, but why have they developed? Can you see what we're battling with now? It's like this lady who's a nurse's aide, just the overdoing of the antibiotics, killing off the flora. I mean, how much flora would those poor elderly people have in their gut? Almost nothing. And so can you see you've lost your protection now? So all sorts of things are getting in. So that's why we have to begin here. You have to build up that gut again. And you see, there's nothing to stop them. That's like taking away all your border protection in America. Who's going to get in? All sorts of terrorists. And this is what's happening here, or you're telling me they're already here. All sorts of terrorists are going to get in there. And how often is the gut addressed? It is not. See, that's why you have to look at why. It's because we've come in with this kill mentality, and it's like one guest said one day, he said, I don't understand. This man was an atheist. He said, I don't understand God. He said, if I was God, I'd get a machine gun and I'd just machine gun all these criminals down. And his wife laughed and said, huh, and what good would that do? Then the next crop would raise up. You see, we have to get away from the kill mentality. And this is what medicine has been doing, mowing them down like machine guns, mowing them down. But remember what I showed you, I rubbed it out, the bacteria, the yeast and fungus, they adjust and adapt. They adjust and adapt. And the more drugs that are thrown at them, they're knocked back, then they adjust and adapt. So they have developed now, because of their kill mentality, microbes that are just about resistance to anything. You look at Ebola, you have a look at Time magazine pictures of Ebola. Every photograph, you look at the background, filthy. It's just filthy. And I'm thinking, what's happening here? They've got to train or educate the people in habits of cleanliness. They've got to start cleaning up and not put all the rubbish outside their houses and start getting nourishment. They've got to get those Coca-Cola cans out of those little villages. Can you see it's a big problem? But I believe that the lecture that I have presented this evening gives some explanation on what's happening today. So I thank you for your attention. And I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow night, where we'll talk on hormones and sexual health. Thank you.